we're going to make pumpkin pie, and we're going to make it from scratch, and that means the crust and the pie filling. And so I'm going to have 1.5 cups of all-purpose flour, and I like to scoop it in gently with a spoon in order to not get the flour all packed down. And then 1 cup of whole wheat flour. And then a little bit of salt. I usually just put some. If you really want to measure it out, it says 1/4 teaspoon. So next we need 1 cup of butter, or in my case, sort of buttery spread. It's a little healthier than butter, but you can go either way. And we need 1 cup. And then we're going to want to sort of chop the butter into the flour. This is sort of a way to mix it. A mixer would not work in this point. You really have to use a fork. All right, after you chopped it in for a while, it should still be kind of chunky. So the next is 4 tablespoons of water. Now I stir this up until it starts to form like a ball of dough. And always when you cook, make sure you wash your hands ahead of time, because you never know when you need to get your hands into what you're making. So in this case, to sort of finish the process up, I'm just gonna use my hands. Then it goes from being the powdery, buttery chunk thing that you saw before to this nice big old hunk of dough. Then take some saran wrap. Put that on top of the dough so the dough doesn't start to dry out while it's in the refrigerator. So don't have to cover it completely, just sort of put it on top. Put it in the refrigerator. So now I'm ready to start on the pie filling. Now normally when you make fresh pumpkin pie, you get a fresh pumpkin. You cut it in half, you scoop out all the seeds and stringy bits, and then you pop it in the oven and bake it for, I don't know, an hour or 2 at 350 degrees. And you basically test it with a fork, and once the inner meat is easily pierced by the fork, you know it's ready, and then you scoop it out and then use however much you need. So that's what I did last year. I had this huge pumpkin and I was only able to bake half of it. And so instead of waiting and baking the other half, what I did was I cut it up into little cubes and I froze raw pumpkin in the freezer. This is a year later and I'm still finishing up this pumpkin. So this is what I'm going to use to make my pumpkin pie filling. So what that means is, first of all, obviously I have to heat this up so it becomes thawed. And so I've done that. Here's some of it now thawed. Now since this was not baked, this pumpkin is going to be juicy. Matter of fact, it's going to be too juicy. So what I do is I sort of squish it down to get some of that juice out. Just look at all that juice. All that water that I don't want in my pie. And then once I squished it down good, I pour out the excess juice. And what I can see is that what was once this container was once filled with frozen chunks, now I've been able to squish it down to about 1 cup. So I find that for this recipe I need 3 cups of pumpkin mush. And so basically I have to fill this thing up to the rim 3 times and heat it up, squish out the extra water. Then again, because this was raw pumpkin, it's still very firm and I want to make mush, so I'm going to have to put this in the microwave for a longer amount of time. But now that I've removed the water, I can put it in a more appropriate dish for microwaving. After you microwaved your cubes, again, like I said, they should be easy to squish into mush. So for this recipe, for 2 pies, you're going to want 3 cups of pumpkin mush. The next is 4 tablespoons of flour. I'm going to use regular all-purpose flour, nothing special about it. After that comes the spices. We'll add 2 teaspoons of cinnamon. Next is half a teaspoon of ginger, half teaspoon of nutmeg. You don't necessarily need to put any of these spices in. If any of these spices you don't like, don't put it in. It's perfectly fine. So here's half a teaspoon of nutmeg. And I like clove, but I find clove to be a really powerful spice. So I'm just going to put a dash or 2 in. I'm not even going to measure it out. And also 1 teaspoon of salt. And then I'll just stir this all up with the pumpkin mush mixed in with the flour and the spices. So I'm going to need 3/4 cup of granulated sugar. Then we also need 3/4 cup of brown sugar. So that'll be 1/2 cup. And with brown sugar, you're actually supposed to pack it down. And then I'll stir that up a bit, get it mixed up. Don't have to do a lot of stirring, I just want to mix it up a little bit. Then I need 3 cups of milk. I'm actually using soy milk here. You can use regular milk. Stir that in a little bit. Suddenly, what was pumpkin mush is turning into pumpkin soup because this is really liquidy. The last ingredient is 4 eggs. Oh, I forgot to mention, but earlier I preheated the oven at 400 degrees. Set it on bake. I started that before I started making the pumpkin mush, so that would give it plenty of time to heat up. So remember that. Now I'll add my 4 eggs. 1. Then you stir that all up. You know, I really wish I had like an overhead camera, you know, that you can see the eggs getting all blended in. So again, you want to mix it thoroughly, making sure the egg is mixed in all the way to the bottom of the mixture. Then you can set this aside because we're going to have to go back to the crust now. Take the crust out of the refrigerator. Remove the saran wrap. If you don't remove it, you're going to have nasty pie. And then I'll sort of divide it in half. And 1/2 I'm going to make into my first pie crust. Usually just a little bit of flour, trying to keep it from sticking on the surface you're rolling it out on. Some sort of rolling device, ideally probably a rolling pin, but I don't have a rolling pin. So I'm going to use a cup. Just a cup. And just roll it on out. Since it's already been kneaded up and all, you don't need to do any kneading. You just need to get it nice and thin and sort of round shape, so it's the right shape to be put into the pie pan when you're done rolling this out. And you should try to make it an even thickness throughout. So that's about the right size. Take it out. In the pie pan, sort of rearrange it because it never seems to quite land the way I want it to land. And then you might need a butter knife or a regular knife to just sort of cut the excess off the top. Now I'm going to do the next one. Strangely enough, it's pretty much the same process. Now the way I add the filling is I ladle it in, allowing me to scoop from the bottom up. So I'll just ladle it out. And then you pop it in the oven. Right, and then we're going to let this cook for doop-a-doop-a-doo. Actually, we can turn it up to 425 and cook it for 15 minutes. And then I will turn it down to 400 and cook for another 45 minutes. So it ends up being an entire hour worth of cooking. So after 15 minutes at 425 and 45 minutes at 400, we have 2 lovely, lovely pumpkin pies. Anyway, thank you for joining us with this episode of Eat In with Adam and John, and hopefully you'll stop in and watch some of our future episodes. Thanks.